Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, I'm very pleased to speak on this important bill in the House today. And I say that obviously I'm a member for Gilmore, representing the New South Wales South Coast, where we've seen some of the most horrific bushfires during 2019 and 2020. And I really want to say thank you to our defence personnel and our reservists for all their work during the bushfires. So this bill today is really important. It will simplify the process for advising the Governor-General prior to the issuing of an order to call out defence reserves. It will also increase the Chief of Defence Forces' flexibility to determine the periods and types of service reserves render during a call-out. It will provide immunity for our ADF and defence personnel in certain circumstances from civil and criminal liability, similar to that enjoyed by civil emergency services. And also, importantly, it will address a gap in current arrangements that currently means reservists providing continuous full-time service during a call-out do not receive superannuation, with the change to be retrospective from November 2019. And, Deputy Speaker, some time ago I think I described the Currowan fire as out of this world, and there really was no way to describe a fire that tormented my community every single day for so many months. Our emergency services, volunteers, our workers, HMAS Albatross with our Defence Force members, they were there from the beginning, from November 2019. So when I speak today, I really want to thank particularly our members from HMAS Albatross that have been working tirelessly behind the scenes to support our state and local and our council areas through the bushfire crisis. So this bill, it is important. It does deserve a proper government response, and that's why I'm standing here talking on this bill today. I am standing here for the fine women and men in my community also, for our children, our organisations, our businesses, everyone that went through the Currowan fires, for our extraordinary volunteer firefighters, our emergency services volunteers and workers, our councils and council workers, for our dedicated Defence Force personnel at HMAS Albatross that provided extraordinary support during the Currowan fires and elsewhere. Operation Bushfire Assist, of course, from the 4th of January 2020, which saw the call-out of 3,000 Australian Defence Force reservists to increase operational support on the ground. Deputy Speaker, HMAS Albatross, as I mentioned, had been involved in supporting the bushfire fighting efforts since November 2019. And I want to particularly thank our outgoing commanding officer of HMAS Albatross, Captain Fiona Sneath, and incoming commanding officer, Captain Robin Phillips. It was certainly indeed literally a baptism of fire around Albatross at that time. I think at that particular time I was also going around and visiting our evacuation centres, and I just happened to run into Captain Fiona Sneath there. And I think it proves the point that everyone was impacted in some way with these bushfires. Even HMAS Albatross itself was under threat from the bushfires. It was a concerted community effort to fight the fires. And of course, HMAS Albatross played a pivotal role as having the bushfire aerial command base there. And that was really a base that was for all the Rural Fire Service, fixed wing and helicopter water bombers. So right along the south coast, wherever you are, and I know people in my electorate would have looked up into the skies, they would have seen those little yellow fixed-wing planes, the water bombers, and it was a great sigh of relief for people, I think, to see those and the work, amazing work that they did, and the same for the helicopters. But a lot of these their aerial command base was back at HMAS Albatross, so our defence personnel were playing such a pivotal role in supporting the emergency management there. HMAS Albatross also provided logistics support, and there was a lot of logistics, water refuelling and retardant loading of our aircraft fighting the fires. They also provided engineering support, day and nighttime aerial mapping of fires, the transport of firefighters accommodation and catering support for firefighters. We had a massive amount of firefighters come into our area, which we're very grateful for. They came from all over the place, and a lot of these firefighters were accommodated at HMAS Albatross. And again, it's thanks to our defence members, our reservists, that provided that support. Importantly, our Defence Liaison Officers, who I'm really proud to say were absolutely played a pivotal role in working side by side with our local emergency services management. I was really privileged to be able to, every morning for months on end, to go into my local fire control or emergency management centre, and we'd have those morning briefings with all the different agencies, and Defence were part of that. And I think that's why HMAS Albatross's efforts were so successful, because they have literally been part of our community for decades, and their response was simply outstanding. Our squadrons at HMAS Albatross were ready and able and to assist people not only in our local area but right across Australia during the bushfires. Our Royal Australian Navy's MRH-90 Taipan helicopters based at HMAS Albatross carried out many evacuations, some from Fisherman's Paradise, North Sassafras and Yowal. And these were quite complex evacuations where they were actually taking people out where there were flames right there and around them, quite difficult terrain, you know, the orange skies, and they just did an absolutely magnificent job. The 808 Squadron in their MRH-90 helicopters also played a key role across Australia, not only in the Shoalhaven but also assisting with evacuation operations in Victoria, delivering liaison teams into isolated areas, dropping off food, water and medical supplies into Mallacoota, and resupplying HMAS tools with everything from nappies for children of evacuees to food for the galley. Since November 2019, flight squadrons flew a total of 640 hours in support of Operation Bushfire Assist 1920. Of these 640 hours, 808 Squadron, based at HMAS Albatross, flew a total of 310 hours. That is an amazing amount of flying time. 808 Squadron also conducted fodder drops for wildlife whose food sources had been destroyed by the bushfires. I want to thank the 808 Squadron members and their commanding officer, Commander Paul Hannigan, and of course their families. This all happened, of course, at a time of year where it's normally quiet, but for everyone, they were on red-hot alert and helping and supporting. I also want to say that I see Defence Force members from 808 Squadron and other squadrons out in the community all the time. They are there supporting and fundraising to help our local community groups. So whether it's the bushfires or supporting our community groups, they are there. I know that we could not be more proud of them and their role at Albatross during the bushfires, and I want to publicly thank them for their efforts. Of course, Deputy Speaker, reservists assisted with a whole range of duties in the bushfires, and often we didn't see them because they were out in the middle of the bush, clearing fallen trees, clearing fire trails, creating fire breaks, putting up temporary bridges or workarounds, whether it was meals, logistics, transport, support and more. So our reservists were there, and I really want to say thank you to our reservists as well. I do want to mention another interesting aspect. Air Affairs, which is a local defence industry contractor, is physically based just outside of the HMAS Albatross at the Aviation Technology Park, and they really played a pivotal role as well. And what they did is they do the fire scans, and that is basically the line mapping of the bushfire activity. So people across Australia probably would have seen that through the bushfires, but that was really important. That line scanning is delivered during both the day and nighttime flight operations, providing imaging of the ground, clearly defining active fire and burnt terrain through dense smoke. which is invaluable support to the RFS, to our water bombers, to our firefighters, defence personnel, a really important service. I just want to talk a little bit about the Eurobodalla, and particularly around Batemans Bay and Moruya in my electorate. The reservists played a vital role there. They were a familiar sight, particularly next to the Batemans Bay Evacuation Centre. And we've got to remember that people went through extraordinary there's really no way to describe it. What people went through was horrendous. And I think, during those difficult conditions, it was certainly a welcome sight and relief for locals to see the Army roll in and set that medical tent up and help with a whole range of duties. Again, we didn't see the reservists quite a lot because they were out in the bush, but they were certainly assisting through, clearing trees and fire trails and things like that. So I do again want to say thank you to our reservists and our Defence Force personnel. Just want to mention about the Mogo Zoo, and people might have heard about that because it's, been in the news quite a lot. And of course, the wildlife park there, the Mogo Wildlife Park, was really hit hard by the bushfires, as was the whole Mogo community. But of course, Chad and his team of wildlife keepers did everything there to protect their animals, and it was just amazing. And when I went back to visit the zoo and to talk with Chad and the team there, I found a team of Army personnel that were working to build a veterinary hospital. And that was for injured native wildlife injured in the bushfires. We've lost over 1 billion animals in the bushfires, and I think this is just another example of where our Army personnel have stepped in. And when I went the first time, I think the walls were just starting to go up, and I had the pleasure of talking to some of the Army personnel there, which was terrific. Army personnel attached to the 5th Engineer Regiment Task Group, part of Defence's Joint Task Force 1110, and also I think assisting them were some Army members from our regional neighbours, which really just goes to show the huge effort from both Australia and right around the world to fight these fires, but also to show that our Army and our reservists played a pivotal role in supporting that. Again, this was a real morale booster for wildlife keepers and their staff. And I was delighted to return again at the official reopening of the zoo and see that vet hospital completed. So I think it's a great example of how our Defence Force members, our councils, our state government and everybody can work together to help fight the fires. And I don't think there's ever a greater example than that, than the disaster effort on the New South Wales South Coast during the bushfires. So I just want to conclude by saying there's been a lot of talk about, obviously, Army Reservists and what role we can play in future. And I think this bill is really, really important because it does go a small but very important way towards helping and supporting our Defence Reservists. But it's not the be-all and end-all. I guess the integration of military, volunteer and paid civilians and contractors during a very long bushfire crisis can sometimes be a very tricky thing to implement. I know I'm certainly lucky to live in the Nowra area and have had HMAS Albatross there for decades. So for me and for people in my local area, HMAS Albatross is part of our community. Our defence members are part of our community. Our reservists are part of our community. And it's those connections along with our local emergency services that is so important. I guess today I've highlighted many positive examples where our Defence Force members have done so well helping through the bushfires. We do need to build on those links and ensure our Defence reservists are ready into the future, and I think this bill will help reservists as well. I just want to say to conclude, thank you to our Defence Force members and their families. We're immensely proud of you and your efforts. We'll never forget that, and thank you.